Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the noisiest, smelliest, most precariously built death traps in the ancient world. A Roman apartment block known to its long-suffering residents as the Insula. The year is somewhere around 150 CE, and you live in a city with over 1 million people and almost no concept of modern plumbing. Your rent is due, your walls are cracking, and there's a suspicious trickle leaking from the ceiling that you sincerely hope is rain. The floorboards creak as you walk across your tiny room, which you share with 3 others, a goat, and whatever moved in last night under the bed mat. Outside your door, someone is arguing over a loaf of burnt bread. A baby is howling in the stairwell, and a drunk fruit seller is serenading his cart with what might be the world's first off-key power ballad. Welcome home. This is the world of the Insulae, multi-story Roman apartment buildings, built fast, cheap, and tall. Some scraped up 7 or 8 stories high, which might not sound impressive until you remember they were made mostly of wood and clay bricks and had 0 fire codes. And oh yeah, no toilets. We'll get to that. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I always love seeing how far this sleepy little channel reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up a narrow, uneven staircase, each step groaning beneath your sandals. It's not just fatigue. The whole structure shifts slightly when people walk like a giant wooden accordion, wheezing under the weight of too many bodies. Historians still argue whether upper floors were intentionally made flimsier to cut costs, or if it just happened that way. Your room, if you can call it that, is part of a labyrinthine complex built around a dark central courtyard. Sunlight barely reaches inside, and the air smells faintly of mildew, old olives, and despair. You've got one window barely big enough for a pigeon to judge you from, and no glass, just a wooden shutter and a strong breeze that never comes when you need it. Life in an insula is a delicate balancing act. You balance on slippery stairs to avoid falling 3 stories. You balance your budget trying to afford both rent and fish sauce. And sometimes you literally balance your cooking fire on a plank of stone so the floor doesn't go up in flames. We'll get to that too. But tonight we're focusing on the big picture. Rome was an empire built on organization, engineering, and urban planning unless you were poor. Then it was built on hope prayer and keeping a bucket under your bed just in case. The richer classes lived in grand villas with marble toilets and heated floors. You live 6 floors up where gravity isn't your friend, and the roof leaks whether it's raining or not. The walls around you are thin. Paper thin. Okay, technically mud brick thin, but in terms of soundproofing, might as well be paper. You hear your neighbor sneeze and wonder if it's contagious. You hear every couple's argument and every child's tantrum like they're inside your own room. And if someone drops a jug upstairs, you duck automatically because sometimes what comes down is worse than water. Interestingly, archaeologists have uncovered charred layers in the ruins of many insulae, suggesting repeated fires over the years. One fringe theory suggests that some residents intentionally torched upper floors to drive rent down or escape debt. Others say it was just cooking gone wrong again. Either way, if you smell smoke, you don't investigate, you run. Down in the street, things aren't much better. The roads are packed, the noise is constant, and the gutters overflow with, well, whatever came out the window. Romans called it Spurcus Vicus, the dirty street. And yes, we will absolutely get to how that worked, bucket-wise. You hear a street vendor shouting about boiled cabbage and someone else cursing in Latin that would make your grandmother faint. Above, laundry flaps in the wind, dripping onto anyone brave or unlucky enough to walk below. One scholar even joked that a walk in Rome is like being cursed by the gods in liquid form. Cheeky, but not far off. Yet somehow there's a rhythm to it. You dodge the falling linen tip your head at the old man carving dice in the corner, and climb past the 4th floor family frying tiny fish on a clay pan balanced over a candle. The smells, sour wine, scorched lentils, wet wool, wrap around you like a blanket woven from urban misery. A pigeon explodes from the rafters. You nearly fall backwards. Your neighbor above throws out a scrap of bone that narrowly misses your head. You don't react. You're Roman. This is normal. And despite it all, the grime, the leaks, the ever-present threat of disaster, there's a kind of stubborn warmth here. Neighbors borrow onions, share firewood, babysit each other's goats. In the middle of the world's most powerful empire, you live on the edge. But you live. Tomorrow, you'll have to empty the chamber pot and hope you don't spill it on your sandals. Tomorrow, the landlord might show up demanding rent or send his goons to remind you. But tonight, you're safe-ish wrapped in a scratchy blanket, lulled by the rhythmic dripping of something in the corner, and the soft cursing of a man trying to light damp kindling downstairs. Don't worry. We'll go deeper literally into how Romans handled sanitation in the next section. Just try not to imagine what's pooling under the floorboards right now. You wake up to a familiar sound, a sloshing thud just outside your door. That followed by a very apologetic, "My panitet," shouted upstairs. Means it's happened again. Someone's emptied their chamber pot, and gravity, true to form, has delivered its contents directly into the hallway. This, unfortunately, is a normal start to the day in your Roman apartment block. Because here's the thing. Insulae didn't come with toilets. Not even the fancy ones. No private latrines, no indoor plumbing. Not even a hole in the floor with a cheerful mosaic of Neptune. If you wanted to answer nature's call in ancient Rome, you had three options. Hold it, use a pot, or head to the public latrines. And option 3 wasn't open all night. So, you, like almost everyone else, keep a chamber pot tucked under your straw-stuffed sleeping mat. When it's full, you carry it gingerly down 6 flights of stairs, trying not to breathe too deeply. If you're respectful, you'll find a street sewer grate and pour it there. If you're tired, distracted, or just a bad person, you'll fling it out the window with a cursory warning shout. Romans even had a phrase for this cave. Canem doesn't just mean beware of dog. It was often shorthand for watch your head in alleyways below Insulae. It wasn't just gross, it was dangerous. Falling waste could cause infections, ruin clothing, or just ruin your entire morning. Historians still argue whether the infamous street grime of Rome was exaggerated by later writers or truly as epic as described. But contemporary sources don't exactly paint a fresh-scented picture. The poet Martial once wrote about walking through the Suburra, Rome's most densely packed neighborhood, and being baptized by the gods in substances he declined to name. The truth is, sanitation in ancient Rome was a tale of two cities. On one hand, Rome had advanced aqueducts, underground sewers like the Cloaca Maxima, and gleaming marble public toilets with flowing water and communal sponges. On the other hand, those things were mostly built for temples forums, and the homes of senators, not your leaky fifth-floor walk-up. Public latrines like the massive 20-seater Latrini Vespasiani were open-air social hubs where Romans did their business shoulder-to-shoulder chatting, gossiping, and debating politics between efforts. If you were lucky enough to live near one, you might make the trek each day, but they weren't always safe. Muggings were common, and the public sponge on a stick called a tersorium wasn't exactly sanitary even by Roman standards, which is why most people, especially those living higher up, opted for the humble chamber pot. Clay or metal, maybe with a lid if you were fancy. Once full, its contents would either be carried down carefully or hurled out the window, usually preceded by a half-hearted shout. Guardade, look out! That's where the Folones come in. Think of them as Rome's waste managers. These hard-working souls collected human waste called urino and sold it to tanners, launderers, and other trades that used ammonia-rich liquid for cleaning. Folones would roam the streets with carts gathering from cesspits and buying directly from households who saved their urine in pots. It was smelly work, but essential to the economy. Kind of like being a walking chemical supplier, if chemicals came in buckets and screamed occasionally. In fact, Emperor Vespasian famously taxed urine collection. When his son Titus criticized the revenue stream, Vespasian supposedly held up a coin and asked, "Does it smell?" When Titus said no, Vespasian replied, "And yet it came from urine." A cheeky justification that gave rise to the phrase pecunia non olet money doesn't stink. Your building has no such poetry. Just a small collection point in the alley where the Folones sometimes come by grumbling about leaky pots and careless tosses. But they're not your biggest worry. That would be the stink. The stairwells reek of everything. Spoiled fish brine chamber pot, splatter rotting vegetables, and that mysterious green liquid that's been slowly spreading across the third-floor landing. You've stopped asking what it is. If it moves, you step over it. If it bubbles, you call the landlord who doesn't answer. You know the air is bad because even the rats wheeze. Cats refuse to enter your courtyard. And the one time a stray dog wandered in it, sniffed once, sneezed dramatically, and trotted away with great dignity. People have their own solutions. Some burn incense, though it mostly just adds a smoky tang to the existing miasma. Others hang bundles of herbs lavender, rosemary, garlic by the window to mask the smell. One neighbor swears by pine tar. Another has given up entirely and now just chews mint while muttering curses. Strangely, you get used to it. Sort of. The human brain has a remarkable ability to filter out bad smells over time. What once made you gag now merely makes you blink and breathe through your mouth. Still, visitors notice. If a distant cousin from the countryside drops by, their face usually twists into an expression of betrayal within seconds. You suspect even the walls smell. The clay bricks, the damp wood beams, the sagging straw of the roof, they've all absorbed centuries of grime. If someone bottled this scent, it would be called Eau de Collapse. And yet, life goes on. The baker downstairs still rolls out dough each morning, waving flies away with a fan made from palm leaves. The seamstress 3 doors over hangs dyed tunics on a rope line sometimes above puddles you try not to think about. And you step around the damp spots, hold your breath near the stairwell, and remind yourself at least you have a roof. For now. Tonight when you crouch over your chamber pot. Yes, we're going there. You'll try not to think about how many others are doing the same. You'll empty it with great care, whispering a half-hearted warning as you tip it over the edge. Then you'll wipe your hands on your tunic, close the wooden shutter, and try to sleep. Because tomorrow brings new challenges. The neighbor's goat will probably escape again. Someone will clog the street drain with olive pits. And if you're lucky, the Falones will finally come by and take away the worst of the day's sins in exchange for coin. Just remember to look up before you walk out. And maybe wear a hat. You're already sweating, and it's not even noon. You've just reached the top of your building, your home, after climbing what feels like 1,000 stairs. In reality, it's 6 floors. Maybe 7, depending on how loosely you define floor. Each level is more precarious than the last, with uneven steps, low ceilings, and walls that seem to tilt a little more each year. By the time you reach your door, you've passed a woman frying garum-soaked sardines on a brick slab, a boy peeing into a cracked pot, and 2 men arguing about whether their shared goat counts as a tenant. Welcome to the Roman insula vertical, living in the ancient world minus elevator safety codes or even basic floor plans. Your thighs burn, your sandals are falling apart, and you have a sneaking suspicion that you've inhaled enough dust to qualify as an archaeological exhibit yourself. Insulae were the backbone of urban housing in Rome, home to most of the population. These towering tenements loomed over narrow, congested streets, packed tight with people, animals, and odors in constant negotiation. Made of brick, concrete, wood, and sheer optimism, they weren't built to last. And yet somehow they did. Sort of. Historians still argue whether insulae could legally rise above 6 or 7 stories, or whether that limit was routinely ignored by developers eager to cram in more rent-paying tenants. Augustus tried to regulate height. So did Trajan. But as with most laws in Rome, enforcement was spotty and bribes were easier than bricks. The higher you lived, the cheaper your rent, and the worse your odds of surviving a fire collapse or ill-timed sneeze that triggered a landslide of ceiling plaster. The bottom floors were more expensive, sturdier, and generally occupied by shopkeepers, bakers, or people lucky enough to afford proximity to the nearest exit. Upstairs, that's where things got experimental. The upper levels were often added in stages with wood-framed extensions, jutting out like scaffolding. Floors warped, stairs groaned. Balconies tilted ever so slightly outward as if they longed to escape. One rogue breeze or drunken neighbor could send the whole thing teetering dangerously like a bakery made of Jenga bricks. You've seen it happen. Not long ago, the building next to yours lost its top 2 floors. A cart bumped the base column just hard enough to wobble a support beam. Within minutes, an entire wall came down like a stage curtain. Mercifully, no one was hurt, though someone's goat was never found. And yet people keep building. Because Rome has too many people, too little space, and far too many opportunistic landlords. Yours is a man named Dalius. You've never met him. He lives across the Tiber in a 2-story villa with heated floors, marble statues, and indoor plumbing. He sends an agent every calends to collect rent a man with a crooked smile and a habit of reminding you that structural maintenance isn't included. When your ceiling cracks, you fix it with mud and prayer. Still, the building has character. Mismatched shutters swing lazily in the breeze. A mosaic of Fortuna smiles faintly from the stairwell wall, though she's missing her nose and both eyes. Ivy creeps through the stonework and pigeons roost in the eaves cooing comfortingly, unless startled, at which point they become feathered projectiles of chaos. Your room leans slightly to one side and the floor slopes downhill, but you've arranged your belongings to match the tilt. You know which plank squeaks, which patch of wall flakes in the night, and which corner to avoid when it rains, because that's when the ceiling drips something untrustworthy. In this house of uncertainty, you've found a kind of rhythm. Your neighbors, also colorful. On the second floor, a retired gladiator runs a cooking school for boys with too much energy and not enough fish sauce. On the fourth floor, a blind man plays the tibia, a twin-piped flute at sunrise. He's very talented. He's also very loud. And above him, a family of 12 shares a space smaller than your mother's pantry, managing laundry toddlers and 3 ducks with eerie efficiency. Everyone knows everyone's business. You smell what people eat. Hear how they argue and can identify your neighbor's footfall based on stairboard creaks. Privacy is a fantasy. You've learned to sleep through wailing infants' love affairs gone sour and the occasional goat chase echoing down the corridor. The insula becomes its own living thing. It breathes with the sighs of exhausted laborers. It shifts with the stomps of returning fishmongers. It trembles when the weather turns and wood swells against stone. And you, perched high above the street like a pigeon with rent to pay, exist in its gut part of the digestive process of a city constantly chewing through history. Some floors have holes punched through the walls for makeshift windows. Others are sealed tight to keep out the rain, which somehow gets in anyway. The plaster flakes like snow, and if you press your ear to the wall, you can hear a love poem being recited 2 rooms over. He's been practicing for weeks. The poem is terrible, but the dedication is admirable. Despite it all, the uneven staircases, the looming threat of collapse, the creative rodent population, there's a strange comfort in this vertical chaos. When the city stirs to life each morning, you feel it. The murmurs, the smells, the clatter of wooden sandals on stone floors, it's a Roman alarm clock you can't snooze. You sit by the window and look out at a skyline of chimneys, drying tunics, and smoke curling lazily toward the heavens. You see old women sweeping their thresholds, children chasing one another with sticks, and a philosopher below tripping over a cart full of leeks. Somewhere down there, the city's great men are making grand decisions. Up here, you just try to avoid falling through the floor. And when you lay down tonight, the roof creaking in the breeze, you'll know your building is held together by faith friction, and possibly the will of Jupiter himself. You'll whisper a small prayer to the household gods that you won't wake up in the street, wrapped in timber and confusion. Because in ancient Rome, living vertically meant living dangerously. You're trying to make dinner. Keyword trying. Your tiny room barely fits you. Your roommate in the clay brazier squatting in the corner like a hungry animal. There's no proper kitchen, no chimney, and no sink. Just a flat slab of stone balanced precariously on 2 bricks with a modest fire flickering under a dented pan. Welcome to high-rise cuisine Roman style. It's smoky. Your eyes water. The only window is open, but the breeze has taken the night off, leaving you to simmer in a low-grade fog of charcoal fumes, boiling lentils, and whatever's wafting up from the alley below. Probably fish guts. Possibly worse. Cooking in an insula is an act of bravery, or desperation, or both. The fire beneath your pot is low, carefully controlled. Too hot, and it'll catch the wooden wall behind it. Too low, and your porridge turns into a grainy swamp. You've learned over time how to feed the flames just enough. It's a skill born from necessity. Because if your cooking fire gets out of hand, your apartment doesn't just get smoky, it becomes a torch. Fires were one of the biggest threats in ancient Rome. Historians agree that urban fires were disturbingly frequent. One spark in the wrong corner, and an entire city block could go up like a pine cone in a furnace. Wood, straw, oilcloth. It's all kindling. And once a fire starts in a crowded 6-story death trap with no fire escape, you run. Well, you try to run. First, you have to make it down the stairs, which, if you recall, double as a laundry rack, social space, and occasional goat trail. In a panic, they become a deadly funnel of screaming bodies and burning debris. That's if you're lucky enough to smell the smoke in time. There's a reason Emperor Nero, yes, that Nero created Rome's first formal firefighting force, the Vigils. Not out of generosity, mind you. Mostly because fires destroyed taxable property. The Vigils patrolled at night equipped with buckets, hooks, and axes. But if they didn't get there in time, the best you could do was grab your tunic and pray. Some residents, knowing this, kept a rope by the window. Not for laundry, though that happened too, but for escape. You could tie it to a beam and lower yourself down floor by floor, swinging gently past confused neighbors and irate pigeons. It was dangerous, yes, but less so than burning to death in your kitchen. You stir your porridge, wincing as the smoke thickens. Your eyes sting. The brazier coughs and sputters, threatening rebellion. You back away and fan the flames with a piece of broken basket. Outside your window, someone is grilling onions. The scent drifts upward, delicious and taunting. You lean out and see a man 2 floors down using an old shield as a makeshift griddle. Fringe accounts claim that some poorer residents simply didn't cook at all. Instead, they bought food from street vendors: bread, cheese, olives, figs, grilled meat on sticks, anything cheap, hot, and questionably fresh. It's not a bad option, except when your budget is already stretched thin by rent, laundry soap, and the occasional bribe to the water seller. Ah, yes, water. Your room doesn't have any. Some insulae had communal fountains or cisterns in the courtyard. Others relied on aquarii entrepreneurial men who hauled water in jugs from the aqueduct-fed reservoirs and sold it door to door. You've bought from them before. Lukewarm, slightly murky, but technically potable. Technically. Historians still debate whether the water delivery system in poor areas was a deliberate design or just the result of resource scarcity. Either way, it meant cooking took planning. No one wastes water on stew unless they're feeling decadent. Most dishes rely on oil vinegar or wine instead, all of which are flammable. So, more fun. Tonight your roommate has decided to cook too, on the same stone slab. You try not to argue. He's boiling lentils. You're toasting barley cakes. The brazier wheezes like a dying bull. Smoke now curls up into the rafters where it meets smoke from the unit above, and the one above that. It collects beneath the ceiling beams like a dark, greasy ghost. You wonder not for the first time if it might be sentient. Some older residents claim the smoke itself is cursed, filled with the breath of all who died in their kitchens. Others say it keeps away bugs. You've seen bugs thriving right through it, so you're inclined to believe the former. You crack open the wooden shutter for some air. A gust blows in finally, but it carries with it the ash and grit of someone else's cooking fire. You cough, sneeze, and drop your spatula. It lands in the porridge with a sad glorp. Outside, you hear a crash. Someone's cooking setup collapsed. There's a moment of silence followed by muffled swearing, and what might be a small fire being slapped out with a tunic. You make eye contact with the family across the alley. They nod solemnly and keep stirring. Every now and then the building shakes slightly, not from an earthquake, but from too many people moving at once. It's subtle but unnerving. A rhythm-developed step sway settle. You wonder how much longer the beams can hold. But you keep cooking, because dinner is dinner, and your barley cakes are almost golden, even if they taste like charcoal and broken dreams. Occasionally a daring soul tries to cook on the roof. It's technically forbidden, but who's checking? Up there you get wind stars and fewer nose-level neighbors. But you also get the risk of setting the roof straw alight, and when the roof goes, it takes everyone with it. You decide it's not worth the gamble. You eat your porridge and toast your cake by the window. The brazier smolders, glowing faintly. Your tunic now smells like roasted lentils and regret. But your belly is full and the fire hasn't spread. That's a win. Tomorrow you'll do it again. Maybe try a stew? Maybe not. For now, you lean back on your creaky mat, listening to the lullaby of cooking chaos echo through the walls. It's oddly comforting, like living in a giant combustible orchestra of hunger and hope. And just before sleep claims you, you murmur your usual prayer. Please, Vulcan, god of fire? Maybe not tonight. It's the middle of the night, and you wake up with a familiar pressure in your stomach. You groan. Not because you're sick, although after last night's barley cakes it's not out of the question, but because you know what's coming next. You shuffle toward the corner where your chamber pot waits lid. Crooked air, thick with the unmistakable tang of vinegar and ammonia. You go silently the way Romans have for centuries, when living without a single private toilet. There's no dignity, no luxury, just the scraping sound of clay and the faint, nighttime chorus of your neighbors doing the exact same thing. By dawn, the building hums with movement. Doors creak open, sandals slap stone, pots clink. And one by one, your fellow residents emerge with sleepy eyes and full containers. You all know the drill. Option 1. Carry your pot 6 floors down to the street. Try not to slosh, find a sewer grate and pour it in, hoping the full-owns haven't already clogged it with yesterday's treasures. Option 2. Find a dark corner of the stairwell and pray no one notices. Option 3, and this one's always risky, is to toss it out the window with a warning shout. You settle for option 1 today. Mostly because the old woman downstairs has threatened to curse the next person who soils her windowsill. Down in the alley, you're not alone. There's a whole unofficial morning procession of pot bearers, one hand on their hip, the other clutching a sloshing clay vessel like it's sacred. And in a way it is. It represents survival self-sufficiency and the very pressing reality of life without plumbing. What's remarkable is how organized it all is. Despite the mess, there's an unspoken system. People dump from the left, never the right. No one crosses in front of a mid-pour. If you splash someone, you owe them bread. If you splash a Fulones worker, you owe them bread, an apology, and maybe a coin. The Fulones are already out in force, men with heavy carts, thick aprons, and hardened expressions. They collect the waste for Rome's lesser-known recycling economy. Urine especially is a hot commodity. Rich in ammonia, it's ideal for cleaning wool, whitening togas, and even tanning leather. There's a Fulonica, an ancient laundromat just a few blocks from your insula. You've passed it many times, workers stomping garments in vats of warm urine, bare-legged and unfazed, chatting like it's just another day in paradise. The smell is profound. Tourists from outside the city often gag. Locals just walk faster. Rome's urban economy thrives on these strange necessities, and where there's waste, there's profit. Some landlords even charge extra to have their buildings' waste harvested by Fulones. Yes, you pay rent and they make money from your pee. Classic Roman efficiency. But there's a darker side to all this. Accidents happen. Especially at night, especially with heavy pots and narrow stairs. You've seen it before: a neighbor slip pot, flying a horrible crash followed by groans and the unmistakable scent of catastrophe. A broken pot is bad. A broken arm and a ruined tunic. Worse, especially when you can't afford either. And yet this is daily life. You carry your empty pot back up the stairs. The woman on the second floor glares at you, sniffing the air suspiciously. You raise your hands in innocence. She narrows her eyes anyway. Her grandson once got splattered by a careless pour and she hasn't trusted gravity since. You pass the 4th floor landing where someone's lined up their pots, 6 of them. You suspect they're storing for sale. Probably to a Fulones cooperative. It's a little shady, but honestly respect. Making money from bodily functions is peak Roman hustle. Back in your room, you rinse the pot with stale wine and a handful of sand. No running water here unless you're rich. Or lucky enough to live next to a Castellum distribution tower that's not dry. The city's aqueducts feed dozens of fountains and public baths, but the insulae, not exactly top priority. Historians still debate whether certain buildings paid bribes to tap illegal pipes into the water lines. There are scratches on old masonry that suggest some apartments tried. Others simply dug deep cisterns or stored rainwater in jars. You use a barrel in the corner, which you top up whenever the water seller passes by. He's an Aquarius, no. Not the horoscope kind, the kind who hauls water from public fountains and sells it by the jug. He's wiry, fast, and not above charging double if you look especially thirsty. You've learned to haggle. You've also learned not to trust the water unless it's been boiled. This means even rinsing a chamber pot is a multi-step process. Heat water, pour, scrub with ash or sand, rinse again, dry in the sun if you're lucky, hide it under the bed if you're not. It's easy to forget in a world where Rome boasts engineering marvels. coliseums, aqueduct sewers, that most of its people live like this. In smoke-choked upper floors, carrying their waste like burdens, praying for working feet and no sudden trips. Still, people find ways to laugh. Jokes pass on stairwells. The man downstairs has painted eyes on his pot, called it Gaius the Gazer, and insists it judges all who pass. Children dare each other to kick abandoned pots in the alley, not knowing or not caring what might be inside. Someone once tried to use one as a drum. Once. There's a strange kind of pride in managing all this without losing your mind. You adapt. You build routines. You get strategic about timing and routes. And eventually you become the one shaking your head at newcomers who clearly have no idea what they're doing. As the sun climbs, the pots vanish back into homes. The alley clears, the smell fades for now, and the city moves on. You lie back on your mat, the morning light creeping across the floor. You've survived another round of the Roman Waste Olympics. You'll do it again tomorrow, maybe with fewer drips. Because in this city of emperors and epics, you high above it all in your creaky little box are quietly mastering the art of ancient sanitation, one awkward trip at a time. By midday, the heat settles like a wet wool blanket over the city, and the air in your apartment grows thick not just with smoke or steam, but with smell. You knew it was coming. The moment you stepped out to dump the chamber pot, a thick waft of sour rot and old vinegar drifted up from the alleyway like a curse. It stuck to your skin, wormed its way up your nose, and now it's followed you home, like a loyal, awful dog. This is the scent of Rome, glorious imperial history-making Rome. It smells like old socks soaked in fermented fish sauce and fear. Ancient writers didn't shy away from describing it. Seneca complained about the eternal stench of the streets. Juvenal joked that you could die from just walking past a tanner's shop. Marshall once described a walk through downtown Rome as a nose battle against 1,000 assaults, sweat, urine, smoke, garlic breath, and mystery stew. And you living in the middle of it all don't have the luxury of being shocked. This is just another part of life in an insula. You recognize smells like old friends, the burnt toast tang of overfired charcoal, the aggressive slap of brine-drenched anchovies, the stomach-churning sweetness of spoiled garum. Garum, Rome's favorite condiment, is everywhere. It's made by fermenting fish guts in the sun for weeks, sometimes months. The result, a pungent, salty liquid that's poured on everything from porridge to pears. Historians still argue whether Romans genuinely liked the taste or if they just wanted their food to taste like something, even if that something punched your sinuses. And then there's the urine. Remember the Fullones and their precious collection buckets? Well, when they don't come often enough or someone misses their pour, the alley becomes a petri dish. It bakes in the sun, mingling with spoiled fruit spilled oil. Horse manure and old blood from the butcher's stall down the block. You once stepped outside to find someone had left a half-eaten eel on the stairs. You never found out who or why. It's still your least favorite mystery. Inside your room, you try your best to keep the stench at bay. Bundles of lavender hang from the rafters, half wilted but still mildly effective. You rub your neck with vinegar-soaked cloth, hoping it masks your own aroma. Some residents burn herbs, bay leaves, sage, even scraps of juniper. But all that really does is replace the stink with smoke. There's no escape, only adaptation. Your neighbor has a more creative solution. She smears her doorframe with goat fat, and rosemary claiming it repels evil and unpleasant odors. It mostly repels visitors. Her room smells like an herb-roasted shoe. And the courtyards? They're worse. You pass through on your way to barter for bread, and the heat hits you like a wet slap. A dog is asleep in a puddle of something you don't want to identify. A toddler is poking a dead rat with a stick. And above you, laundry drips a strange pinkish fluid from the third-floor line. You don't ask questions, you just move faster. There are clean places in Rome, the baths for one. Public thermae are massive, marbled, and mildly less repugnant, assuming you're not sitting next to someone who skipped the appetiterium changing room and forgot the concept of soap. Bathhouses are also where people gossip, argue politics, and occasionally break into spontaneous wrestling matches. They're loud, busy, and not free. Which means you don't go as often as you'd like. Instead, you've learned shortcuts to avoid the worst-smelling streets. You know which alleys reek of tanning chemicals, which doorways are used as late-night urinals, Which bakeries burn their loaves at exactly 3 p.m., releasing clouds of fragrant carbon into the air. You time your errands accordingly. Your errands. You've also developed a nose hierarchy. On a scale of 1 to deadly vapor, you can now distinguish between fish sauce from a broken jug, strong but tolerable; unattended chamber pot, offensive, possibly dangerous; overflowing sewer grate in July, call the gods, it's time to move. Scholars debate whether the famous Roman sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, actually helped everyday citizens. It certainly drained excess water, but most insulae were too far uphill or too disconnected to benefit directly. That left the lower-class neighborhoods to stew in their own runoff, literally. On especially bad days, you've seen people walk around with cloth over their mouths, soaked in rose oil. It helps. Slightly. Others carry bundles of herbs to breathe through or just power walk from one stink zone to another like they're dodging ghosts. One man on your floor swears by a special blend: crushed pine cones, cedar ash, and wine dregs stored in a ceramic jar. He inhales it before leaving the house. He also claims it keeps the gods from smiting him, which might be overkill, but who are you to judge? But despite all this, despite the smells that cling to your clothes, fill your lungs, and haunt your dreams, there's something weirdly resilient about it all. Romans are nothing if not adaptable. You laugh through it, you curse it, you live with it. Eventually, your nose just gives up and decides this is normal. Tonight, the breeze picks up at last. You crack open the window, and for a moment, just a moment, the air feels clean. You inhale, you smile, you savor that rare, rare breath of something that smells like freedom. Then a pigeon poops on your sill, and the neighbor downstairs throws out fish bones. Back to reality. By the time the sun climbs to its highest point, every surface in your little upper-floor apartment is glowing with heat. The clay bricks sweat. The wooden shutters warp. Even your mattress, a woven pile of straw and moth-eaten linen, feels like it's slowly baking you into a person-sized pie. You sit motionless, watching a bead of sweat roll down the jug of stored water in the corner. You ration it carefully. No running water here, not in an insula like yours. Not when you're 6 floors up and the aqueducts don't climb stairs. Water is precious, and you're not rich enough to have it piped into your walls. Most Romans aren't. The aqueduct system is famously massive and majestic, but it was never built with the common renter in mind. Historians still argue whether the government deliberately prioritized elite villas and bathhouses over tenement blocks, or whether it just wasn't feasible to stretch all those stone channels into the chaotic vertical puzzle of poor neighborhoods. So what do? You fill a jar from the local castellum if you're lucky enough to live near one of Rome's water distribution towers. If not, you hike down often barefoot and crabby to the nearest Lacus, a public fountain, and hope it's flowing. There's a trickle today. Just enough for you to top off your jug. You press your hands under the spout and savor the cool splash on your fingers. This isn't just refreshing, it's ritual. It's survival. The line behind you mutters as you linger too long. But who can blame you? Rome's sun is aggressive and your room is a brick oven with bedbugs. On your way back, you pass by a friend on the first floor, Flavius, the guy who inherited a broom closet with a window and somehow made it cozy. He's got a cistern, a real one. Dug deep and lined with clay, it catches runoff from the rooftop. In dry seasons, he bribes the local water seller to top it off. You pretend not to be jealous, you fail. Water sellers' aquarii roam the streets, pushing carts or balancing buckets from yokes. They buy water cheap or steal it and sell it for a markup to people like you. Some are honest, most are not. You once caught one trying to pass off Tiber water, unfiltered, chunky, suspiciously green, as spring-fed mountain flow. You didn't fall for it. Your stomach didn't forgive you anyway. The wealthy don't deal with any of this. They live in domus with private piping marble basins and even fountains that burble gently like some smug water show. You've peered into courtyards where servants casually douse marble floors with buckets of clean water just to cool the air. Meanwhile, you're over here debating whether to rinse your feet or save that cupful for later. Bathing becomes a game of creativity. A sponge soaked in tepid water wrung carefully over the head. A bowl under the chin to catch the drips and reuse. Some tenants just skip the whole thing, especially in winter, and wear perfume instead. You once did that for a week. It was An experiment. Results mixed. Experiment. The public baths are the great equalizer. For a few coins, you get hot water, warm benches, and the closest thing to luxury your coin purse allows. The problem? Timing. The thermae are packed at all hours, splashing, shouting, gossiping, and the occasional stolen sandal. Once you caught someone using the bath as a laundry tub. No one stopped him. Honestly, it kind of made sense. But your building, it has nothing. No plumbing, no pipes, not even a shared basin. Some families haul buckets to the roof and pour them slowly, making a sad little cascade over the eaves. Kids stand underneath laughing. You tried it once. Your neighbor called it a waste of water and cursed your ancestors. You're still not sure it didn't work. The insulae were never designed for comfort. They were fast-built, often cheaply constructed, and made to house dozens, sometimes hundreds of people in spaces meant for a fraction of that. Fireproof bricks on the bottom floors, flimsy wood on the top. No insulation, no drains, no plumbing. Just your bucket, your jug, and your stubborn will to make it all work. The worst part. The courtyard fountain, the one just outside your building, is always broken. Cracked spout. Leaky basin. It's supposed to be fed by a public aqueduct, but half the time someone's diverted the flow, and the rest of the time it's being used as a communal footbath. You gave up on it months ago. You once heard of a man who rigged a pulley system to lift water up to his 5th floor room. He used a donkey, a long rope, and questionable math. It worked, until the donkey refused to climb stairs anymore. Now he's back to carrying jugs. The donkey, on the other hand, was last seen living with a baker. Even cooking becomes an exercise in hydration logistics. Want to boil lentils? That's water. Washing your hands after chopping garlic, more water. Want to not die of dehydration after sweating through your tunic by noon? Still more water. You budget every drop like gold. You've got a trick now. You bury a sealed jar underground during the morning and dig it up at dusk. It's not cold, but it's less than scorching. Small victories. And sometimes you find yourself at a friend's place. A wealthier friend. Maybe they have a pipe-fed basin. Maybe the water even sings a little as it flows. You wash your hands slowly, reverently. You don't want to leave. You dry off with a towel that smells of actual soap, and you swear it's the most decadent thing you've ever touched. Then it's back up the stairs, back to the jug, back to reality. And still you carry on. You've learned to stretch a jug across 3 days. You've taught your elbows how to support a water jar without cramping. You can eyeball whether a ladle is too much. You dream of fountains, sometimes wide, clear, cold ones. But for now, you sip carefully. You let the last drop trickle onto your tongue and you lean back against the wall, imagining rain. It's past sundown now and the walls are finally beginning to release the heat they've been hoarding all day like a bitter miser. You lie still, eyes half shut, not from sleep, but from a sort of resigned exhaustion. Every joint in your body aches with the low throb of survival. And then you feel it. Skitter. A tiny sound. A faint whisper of claws on clay. You lift your head slowly and squint toward the corner. There, illuminated by the low flicker of a neighbor's oil lamp through the thin slats of your shutter, a mouse darts across the room. Again. Welcome to Pest Hour. You're never alone in an insula. Never. Even when your neighbors are gone and the streets are quiet, the other residents come out, the invisible ones with tiny feet and far too many legs. Historians agree Roman tenements were teeming with life of the itchy, squeaky, and slightly horrifying variety. Rodents, lice, bedbugs, cockroaches, and the occasional scuttling centipede. Some sources even mention scorpions in the walls. Cute. You've developed something of a nightly routine for this. First, the bug shake. You pat down your bedding, your tunic, your sandals, because the last time you didn't, you woke up scratching like a flea-ridden dog and found a centipede napping inside your sleeve. Then you check the bread stash. Any signs of nibbling mouse droppings? Tiny bite marks. You once lost an entire cheese wedge to a nighttime rodent raid. It was tragic. You still mourn it. Lice are a daily battle. Roman hair hygiene wasn't what you'd call advanced. Most people oiled their hair to keep it manageable, but lice loved the stuff. And unless you could afford regular trips to the bathhouse, you were probably their banquet table. There's even graffiti in Pompeii cursing the woman who gave me lice. You feel that one deeply. There are treatments. Vinegar rinses, sharp-toothed combs, crushed herbs. Some say wormwood oil drives them away. Others say it only makes them mad. You've tried garlic paste? It didn't help the lice, but it definitely helped with social distancing. Your neighbor across the hall has a more dramatic solution. He sleeps surrounded by small pots of ash, claiming it repels bugs. You suspect it just makes him dusty and bitten, but he swears by it. Then there's old Levia, who once bought a snake from a passing peddler and let it loose in her room to deal with her mouse problem. The mouse disappeared. So did the snake. No one's seen it since. Levia still sleeps with a stick nearby. Bedbugs are especially tenacious. They nest in the straw of your mattress, the joints of your bed frame, the little cracks between the bricks. You've tried baking your bedding in the sun. You've tried smoking them out with bitter herbs. One time in a desperate fit, you dragged your mattress outside and beat it with a broom for 20 minutes. A crowd gathered. Someone applauded. Historians still argue whether pest infestations were seasonal or simply a permanent state of affairs in dense Roman housing. What's clear is that most residents like you lived in a state of uneasy truce with the crawling world. You stomp, they return. You trap, they adapt. It's not so much pest control as pest diplomacy. You've gotten clever. You store grain in clay jars with oiled lids. You dangle cured meats from the ceiling using waxed twine and little bells to alert you of intruders. You stuff the base of the doorframe with rags soaked in vinegar and salt. The smell is unpleasant. But then again, what isn't around here? You've even named one of the mice. He's missing half an ear and limps when he runs. He seems to know when you're not looking. You think he may be training others. A mouse general. You're not paranoid, you're prepared. Then there's the floor. Ah, the floor, a cracked mosaic of bricks and dirt, occasionally swept never truly clean. Once, while trying to catch a cockroach the size of your thumb, you discovered a loose tile. Beneath it, a cache of dried beans. Someone, perhaps decades ago, had hidden food there. You took it as a sign from the gods. You boiled them. They tasted like hope and mildew. Despite the menace, there's also an odd rhythm to it all. You learn to live with the pests. You sleep light trained to wake at the faintest scratch. You know where to step to avoid triggering a roach exodus. You know which shelves can't hold food and which jars must be double sealed. You've accepted that the straw mattress may have more legs in it than you do, and still every morning you rise. You stretch. You scratch. You comb your hair squinting for tiny white eggs and shake your tunic out the window like a daily exorcism. One day, a visitor from the countryside came to stay with a friend on your floor. He lasted 2 nights. Claimed the bugs were trying to eat his soul. He left in the middle of the third screaming about a spider the size of a walnut. You never even saw it. Your theory, he made it up. Weak character. But pests weren't just a nuisance, they were a threat. Fleas, lice, rats. These weren't just inconvenient. They could carry disease. Ancient plagues likely spread faster in cramped quarters like yours, where even clean water was hard to come by, and cleanliness was mostly aspirational. It wasn't just gross, it could be fatal. Still tonight, like every night, you light a bit of rosemary in a clay dish. The smoke curls lazily in the dark. You whisper a few words to Laris, the household spirits. You ask for quiet. You ask for sleep. You ask for fewer bug bites. And if the mouse general is listening from the shadows, you ask him politely to leave your cheese alone. Another morning, another mild disaster. You wake to the sound of someone yelling on the street again. Something about stolen sandals or maybe bad fish. You can't tell. You're too busy checking the ceiling for cracks. A fine sprinkle of dust is drifting down from the corner above your cot. That's new. Not a good sign. You roll off your straw mattress and tiptoe across the floor, careful not to jostle the stack of amphorae you've cleverly repurposed as furniture. The wall feels damp. The bricks above have shifted ever so slightly. The apartment is sighing in its sleep. This is life in a Roman insula, a tenement so unstable your most trusted structural engineers hope. These buildings rise fast and tall, 6, sometimes even 7 stories, crammed with humanity from bottom to top. If the Colosseum was a monument to Rome's grandeur, the insulae were a monument to its overcrowding. Some scholars believe there were tens of thousands of these buildings across the city. Others argue the number is exaggerated, pointing to the limited surviving ruins. But what's certain is that for every grand marble villa, there were dozens of brick shoeboxes stacked like haphazard dice. You live in one of the upper units, not because you love a view, but because rent up here is cheap, and for good reason. Let's do the math. Top floor, Synod, lowest rent. Lowest rent, Susquide, no running water. No toilet, no guarantee the roof won't collapse while you're out buying lentils. On paper, the ground floor is the prize, thicker walls, fewer stairs, sometimes even plumbing. But that also means you're closer to the street noise, the stink, and the occasional surprise flood from a backed-up drain. Plus, those prime units are often rented out to shops or businesses. The middle floors are decent if you can afford them, but most folks like you climb, and climb you do. Daily. Usually with full jugs of water, bundles of kindling, or yesterday's laundry in tow. The staircases, if you can call them that, are narrow, uneven, and steep enough to make you reevaluate every choice that led you here. No railing, of course. That would be a luxury. You've mastered the technique of hugging the inside wall and keeping your center of gravity somewhere near your ankles. Now about that ceiling. It groans occasionally. That's normal, right? A little settling, a little shifting standard for third-rate Roman construction. You press your hand against the bricks. They feel warm, dry on the outside, crumbly underneath. Last week, a chunk fell from the corridor outside and hit your neighbor's cat. The cat survived. It now walks with a permanent scowl. There's a popular saying among tenants, don't trust a quiet building. It's probably collapsing. The building codes in Rome do exist technically. Emperor Augustus himself issued height restrictions after a few too many towers toppled like soggy breadsticks. He capped buildings at around 70 Roman feet, about 65 modern feet. Historians still argue whether anyone actually enforced this or if it was just another rule ignored by greedy landlords. Speaking of landlords, yours lives in a luxurious villa outside the city and hasn't been seen in months. He sends a manager, an oily man named Lucanus, who shows up once every few weeks to inspect things, which mostly means standing around scowling and making notes on a wax tablet. You once asked him to repair the cracked window shutter. He said he'd look into it. That was 3 seasons ago. Repairs are rare. Maintenance rarer still. Most tenants learn to do it themselves or not at all. You've patched up cracks with a mixture of olive oil and powdered brick. It didn't hold. You tried beeswax. Better, but now the wall smells delicious and ants visit daily. Once during a hard rain, your ceiling leaked so badly you had to hang your bedding from ropes and sleep beneath it like some kind of sad linen tent. Your friend from 2 floors below lent you a plank of wood to wedge under the wet spot. That was 6 months ago. The plank's still there. It's become part of the decor. Sometimes whole floors collapse. That's not an exaggeration. Ancient writers like Juvenal and Seneca mention the frequent disasters of shoddy tenement housing. Seneca even joked that a rich man fears being poisoned by his slaves, but a poor man fears the roof caving in while he's asleep. You laughed when you read that. Then you looked up at your ceiling and laughed a little less. And yet, here you are. You've developed a deep intimacy with every creak and moan of your unit. You know which floorboard will betray you with a loud groan if you step on it before dawn. You know how to hang your oil lamp so it doesn't tilt when the wind rushes through the wall cracks. You even know how to balance the chamber pot so it won't tip over if the floor shifts during the night. You've seen what happens to those who ignore the signs. The building across the alley collapsed last year. No one was home, thank the gods. But the rubble is still there, half cleared now, a home for stray cats and one very determined fig tree. The rumor is that the landlord bribed an inspector to get it declared safe 6 months before it fell. No one was surprised. It's strange, though. Despite everything, the instability, the stairs, the neglect, this place works, somehow. Because this is also a place of humanity. Of smells from someone's stew pot drifting up through the cracks. Of kids playing knucklebones on the landing. Of a neighbor humming while she grinds barley for bread. A place where you know the voice of every creaky board and every angry pigeon nesting in the eaves. Tonight you'll light your lamp and watch the flickering shadow of the cracked ceiling stretch across the floor like a lazy serpent. You'll wonder idly if tonight's the night it all comes down. Then you'll roll over, close your eyes, and sleep anyway. Because what else can you do? You're trying to sleep. Honestly, you are. But there's a man downstairs performing something with cymbals and what sounds like a badly tuned lyre. He's been going at it for an hour. Your neighbor is clapping along. Someone else is arguing about lentils through an open window. And above you is a couple discovering the acoustics of Roman floorboards in a way that's not subtle. This is the lullaby of an insula, an orchestra of pots, clanging babies, crying dogs, barking sandals, flopping, and lovers performing. Forget peace and quiet. The idea of a silent Roman night is a myth like polite senators or reliable plumbing. The walls are thin. Not just metaphorically, physically. Most of them are partition walls made of timber plaster or sun-dried brick designed more for speed than soundproofing. You sneeze and 3 people bless you. You drop a spoon and the downstairs neighbor shouts up asking if it was the copper one again. If you're lucky, the people next door are decent sorts. Noisy maybe, but friendly. If you're unlucky, they're the kind who use their room for cooking pungent fish stew at midnight, or practice the panpipes right after dinner. Historians still argue whether Rome had any form of noise ordinance. Some evidence suggests there were regulations about vendors and street musicians, but enforcement was famously spotty. And besides inside your building, it's every tenant for themselves. Above you, the bed frame is creaking in regular bursts, you sigh. Some Romans paid for specially constructed ceilings with sound-deadening materials, thicker plaster layers of reeds, but only in expensive villas. In insulae, you're lucky if the beams don't fall. If you want quiet, you move to the countryside. If you stay in the city, you learn to live with the soundtrack. There's the kid down the hall who practices his Latin verbs out loud very loudly right around dinner time. Amo, amas, ama, you can't help muttering along now. You're learning by osmosis. Then there's the old man downstairs. No one knows his name. He just yells at pigeons every morning, without fail. He calls them thieves. You think he might be right. And don't forget the street below. Oh, the street. Rome's eternal heartbeat. Cobblestones clacking under cartwheels. Shouting vendors hawking fruit olives, honey cakes. Drunken arguments sloshing out of corner taverns. You once timed a shouting match that went on for 2 whole hours, something about a borrowed tunic and a broken amphora. It ended with one man being carried off and the other falling asleep upright against a pillar. The cobblers start early tapping nails into sandals before the sun is up. The fish sellers arrive soon after shouting prices and flinging tuna like it's going out of style. Then come the roosters, which oddly are less predictable than the street preachers who start wailing about sin and sacrifice before dawn. Your favorite was the guy who insisted everyone needed to repent by pouring vinegar on their toes. He got chased off, but not before someone actually tried it. And yet, you adjust, you adapt, you learn how to tune out just enough. You nap in bursts. You master the midday siesta. You train yourself to sleep through background noise like a Roman soldier in a barracks. You get so used to the chaos that on the rare quiet nights when the rain drives everyone inside or a holiday lulls the neighborhood into stupor, you can't sleep. The silence is too loud. You start recognizing your neighbors by their noises. The woman with the stomping toddler apartment left second floor. The man with the chronic throat-clearing top floor near the laundry line. The off-key whistler. He's somewhere on your side of the building and needs to be stopped, but you haven't pinpointed him yet. The shared spaces in the building, the stairwell, the landing, the corner where everyone dumps their broken pots echo with life. You hear whispered conversations, brief spats, someone tripping over someone else's laundry basket. You remember one night during a storm when the rain pounded the roof so hard it sounded like falling pebbles. Everyone in the building emerged into the corridor groggy, wet-eyed, but wide awake. No one said anything. You just stood there together in the flickering glow of a single oil lamp, listening to the storm, nodding silently at each other. Community through inconvenience. You've shared meals through windows past jugs of wine across balconies, lent someone your only clean tunic because theirs was nicked off the drying line. The sounds can drive you mad, but they also keep you connected. Still, you dream of quiet. You dream of a room with thick stone walls just 1 floor up, maybe where no one plays cymbals after midnight, or hurls chamber pot contents out the window at sunrise. A room where you could lie down and not know the names of everyone's pets by ear. You once tried earplugs. Rolled up wax sealed with wool. It worked until you didn't hear the knock warning that the building's water jug had cracked and was flooding the common landing. You woke up to damp sandals and a very upset Lucanus the manager. He fined you for non-cooperation. Typical. And yet as you lie here tonight with the bed frame above still thudding the street musicians winding down and a soft argument blooming 2 doors down, you're oddly comforted. This noise is your lullaby, a broken, bustling lullaby. It's proof the building's still standing, that people are still eating, loving, arguing, singing, that life is happening all around you, just as it always has. You roll over, pull the thin blanket up to your chest, and let the chorus of Rome drift around you like a warm, chaotic breeze. Let's get something straight. Just because you're on the ground floor doesn't mean you're living the high life. You might have more space and fewer stairs to curse, but you're also closest to the filth, the flooding, the rats, and the daily drama of Roman street life. The common belief rich folks live lower, poor folks live higher. And in general, that's true. But it's not a perfect system. You see, insulae were sort of vertical social pyramids. The closer you were to the base, the more money you had, or at least the more you paid in rent. Ground floor units could be downright luxurious by tenement standards. Thicker walls, real floors, not packed earth. And if you were truly lucky, a shared toilet or even running water from a spout connected to a nearby aqueduct. Don't get too excited though. Most plumbing in Rome avoided apartment blocks altogether. Still, there's a reason people paid more to live closer to the street. It was practical. Easier access to shops, fountains, and temples. No long daily treks up 5 flights with water jugs and firewood. And in the event of a fire, let's just say you weren't the one yelling from the rafters with no way down. But here's the reality check: you're also close to the Cloaca Rome's sprawling sewer system. And while this engineering marvel was one of the city's great achievements, it wasn't perfect. When it rained, the drains backed up. When they cleaned the streets, which wasn't often, the runoff would find the lowest point. Spoiler, that's where you live now. Your front door sits just inches above the cobblestones. One hard rain, and you're ankle deep in a slurry of donkey droppings, spoiled grain, and mystery goo from the nearby tanner's vat. You've learned to keep your sandals inside and your sleeping mat off the floor. Rats? Of course there are rats. You've named 2 of them. They're disturbingly clever and oddly loyal to your crumbs. Then there's the noise. It never stops. Above, sure, people stomp and shout and live their lives. But down here, your window opens right onto the street. People lean on it, shout into it, even try to sell you things through it. Fresh Garm. Aged to perfection like your mother's breath. Buy a charm against toothworms. Have you heard the latest about that senator with the goat? You'd close the window, but it's your only source of fresh air. Plus, if you block the breeze, the heat builds up faster than a tavern tab during festival week. Also, and this is critical, being on the ground floor means you are directly in the splash zone of every falling object from above. Roman buildings didn't have enclosed waste disposal systems. If someone on the 5th floor dumped a full chamber pot out their window, which they will and probably already have today, you had better not be walking by. There's an entire etiquette, unspoken of course, around tossing things from windows. You're supposed to yell first. Something like "Cave Canem" or "Mind your head." Some people don't bother, others shout for the joy of it. You've taken to wearing a wide-brimmed hood when stepping outside. It's not fashion, it's survival. And then there's the privacy issue. Or lack thereof. Your walls might be thicker, but your window is everyone's business. The local gossip brigade stands outside every evening, arms crossed necks, craning ready to comment on everything from your washing technique to your love life or conspicuous lack thereof. Still, you can't lie, the convenience is tempting. You step outside and you're already in the thick of Roman daily life. Vendors call your name. Your friend Flavia waves from the corner tavern. You're on a first-name basis with the goat that delivers milk next door. And the rent, oof. It's high. Higher than you'd like, especially given the mold issue in your corner alcove and that mysterious smell that no one can quite identify. But when your cousin from the top floor visits sweaty, breathless, clutching a cracked jug of water, you can't help but feel a little smug. Of course, with higher rent comes higher expectations. Your landlord actually visits this floor. Or, more accurately, his steward does. Lucanus again. He checks for cracks, sniffs the air, frowns meaningfully. You tried complaining once about the backed-up gutter that dripped something foul onto your door. He nodded solemnly, wrote a note on his wax tablet, and then asked if you could pay next month's rent a few days early. Classic Lucanus. Still, there's a certain comfort in being close to the pulse of the city. You hear the hoofbeats of messengers galloping down the Via Flaminia. You smell the first hints of roasted chestnuts before anyone upstairs even knows they're for sale. You're part of the street for better or worse. Remember that woman who threw a fruit peel at a senator's litter? You saw it happen. She ducked behind your doorframe. You lent her a headscarf and told the guards she'd gone south. She brought you honey cakes the next day. There's a rhythm to it. A symphony of footsteps, laughter arguments, animal brays, and whispered prayers. You learn to distinguish a drunk stumbling home from a thief trying to be quiet. You know which merchant closes early, which beggar sings, which couple will argue loudly after wine. Yes, you live with the smell, and the noise, and the occasional splash. But you also live with life. And in a Roman apartment block, that's the most you can ask for. So tonight, as you lie down close to the floor, very close, you let the murmur of the street lull you. You breathe through your sleeve, just in case pull the thin wool blanket around your shoulders and listen to the soft clatter of cartwheels fading into the night. Because down here, you're not above the chaos. You are the chaos. Somewhere between the laundry line and the stairs that creak like haunted floorboards of love blooms. Or at the very least, something happens brief, complicated, and entirely audible to every other tenant. You don't live in a palace. You live in a sardine can stacked 5 stories high, and privacy is a myth. So when your upstairs neighbor flirts with the olive seller through a cracked window, everyone knows. When the baker's apprentice kisses the weaver's daughter by the stairwell, 5 people pass by and 2 of them cough loudly on purpose. You've witnessed a dozen almost romances blossom and burn out before anyone even said I do. But that's the strange charm of Roman insula life. Everything's shared, including affection gossip and occasionally undergarments that went missing from the laundry robe. You step out onto the tiny balcony, barely wide enough for your elbows. It's draped with drying tunics, togas, and someone's questionable underpants, fluttering like defeated flags. You're trying to spot your own tunic, which is definitely not the one that's now halfway down the alley thanks to a gust of wind and some cosmic mischief. You wave to Flavia across the way. She's holding a broom which she uses less for sweeping and more for poking pigeons and swatting admirers who get too bold. She mouths something about the neighbor's goat being in her storage basket again. You mime sympathy. She grins. The flirting begins. Historians still debate how common romantic partnerships were between tenants, especially among the working class. While elite Romans had arranged marriages and political unions, your typical insula dweller had to rely on proximity charm and the ability to carry a water jug without tripping. And nothing screams romance like holding hands while waiting in line for the communal fountain. Downstairs, a boy is plucking a stringed instrument that's missing 2 strings. His serenade is painful but sincere. He's aimed it upward toward the 3rd floor. A face appears, then quickly vanishes. You can't blame her. The tune sounds like a goat stepping on a cat. Meanwhile, a young couple argues about olives on the landing. Or maybe it's about money. Or who gets to use the better pot for dinner. You can't quite tell. Their voices rise, bounce off the stone walls, then fall into silence. A moment later, laughter. It always ends in laughter or stomping, sometimes both. Laundry lines become bridges between apartments. A forgotten sock ends up in someone else's basket. A stained tunic is swapped for a less stained one. Small gestures of kindness or revenge. Once someone cut the line entirely and a dozen garments fell into the alley sludge. The culprit was never found. Suspicion remains thick. It's not all flirtation and fabric, though. There are rivalries, too. That family on the 4th floor that never returns borrowed oil. The widow who hoards salt and glares at everyone. The man who hums off-key when nervous, which is always. But mostly you all exist together. There's no hiding your flaws when everyone can hear your stomach growl through the walls. No pretending to be someone you're not when your tunics are drying in plain view and your breath smells like yesterday's lentils. Still, the proximity can be useful. When your lamp wick burns out, someone lends you theirs. When you fall sick, a neighbor brings herbs or at least a strong opinion about herbs. When the stairwell collapses again, everyone pitches in to climb around it like ants over a log. And sometimes when the night is warm and the stars peek out between rooftops, people gather on balconies. They share wine. They talk. Someone plays a flute badly, but you're used to that. Children toss walnut shells over the railing, trying to hit a specific crack in the cobblestone. One night, you catch two silhouettes holding hands by the fountain. They say nothing. Just sit still as statues until the sky goes violet and the bakers begin their first loaves. That's how love works here. It's quiet. It slips through the cracks like lamplight under a door. Quirky rituals pop up too. One neighbor swears by hanging garlic near the laundry to ward off heartbreak. Another insists on whispering their crush's name into the communal drainpipe. You don't participate, but you've definitely listened. Who wouldn't? And of course, there's graffiti. Rome's walls speak. They speak in chalk and scratched brick and painted insults and affection alike. Some declare love eternal. Others settle disputes or mock rival lovers. One near your insula reads, "I love Livia even when she steals my sandals." It's signed with a crude little fish drawing. Classic. It's strange how little you see people in a place like this, yet how deeply you know them. Their voices, their footsteps, their arguments, their laughter, the rhythm of their evenings, the sighs after dinner, the clink of cup against cup. You hear Flavia again this time, shouting playfully at someone below. A chuckle follows. You don't know who she's talking to, but you smile anyway. This life isn't romantic in the way scrolls and poets describe. There are no roses, no orchestras, no stolen chariots under moonlight, but there is warmth. There is familiarity. There are glimpses of affection between cracked walls and uneven floors. Love that grows not in grand gestures, but in daily survival. In passing the olive jar back and forth. In rescuing a tunic from the rain. In sharing a joke through a wall. As the sun dips low, you light your small lamp. Shadows stretch across the room. From outside comes a soft, good night in a voice you know well, though you've never seen the speaker's face. You whisper it back, just loud enough to be heard. Because here in the cramped chaos of a Roman apartment, even the quietest words can echo like poetry. You shift slightly on your mat, listening to the creak of footsteps on the stairs and the low murmur of neighbors through the walls. But tonight, there's something else, a faint smell of burning herbs, just enough to make your nose twitch. It's not dinner, it's not incense. It's something older, stronger, a ritual kind of smell. That's when you remember it's Calends tomorrow. First of the month, the day the spirits expect attention. You step into the hallway, and sure enough, someone's already left a small clay dish by the door, smoking faintly. A few grains of spelt, a nub of cheese, and a twist of wool lie arranged carefully beside a flickering oil lamp. It's an offering. Not to the gods of Olympus, not Jupiter, not Mars, but to the Lares and Penates. Household spirits, invisible roommates, the other tenants of your insula. In a Roman home, religion isn't reserved for temples or festival days. It's a daily whisper, a glance at a small shrine, a muttered plea before breakfast. Especially in a place like this where the walls are thin, the ceilings crack, and fortune hangs by a fraying thread. You, like most apartment dwellers, maintain a humble lararium, a corner niche barely big enough for a figurine and a saucer. The figurine might be terracotta or carved bone. The saucer is probably chipped. Doesn't matter. The Lares don't ask for much, just recognition. Historians still argue whether every apartment had its own dedicated lararium, or if poorer families shared them communally, perhaps one per floor or even one per stairwell. But either way, the belief is strong. Neglect the household gods and you tempt misfortune, moldy bread, a burst water jug, or worse, unexpected visits from Lucanus. Tonight you add your own offering, a pinch of flour, a bit of leftover lentils. You whisper a few practiced words, nothing fancy but heartfelt, and tap the wooden beam above your niche. It's a habit, like knocking wood. Except this one's older than the empire itself. Around the building, the ritual repeats. Quiet flames, low chants. An old man on the top floor croaks a hymn from memory. A child on the second floor makes his Lares a necklace from bread crusts. Someone downstairs is burning juniper and garlic enough to chase out evil, or at the very least the smell of the communal stairwell. Religious life in Rome is woven through everything. Even in your crumbling tenement, you'll see chalk marks on door frames to ward off thieves. Knotted cords over lintels. Phallic wind chimes that rattle in the breeze. Not scandalous, but sacred. They're called fascia, and they're supposed to guard against the evil eye. You saw one fall the other day. Rusted clean off. The apartment flooded 2 days later. Coincidence, maybe. You fixed yours that night. Then there are the traveling holy men, mutterers, astrologers, charm sellers, who loiter near the public fountain offering cures, blessings, or slightly moldy scrolls promising success. You've ignored them more than once, but after your third stubbed toe in a week, you bought a small amulet just in case. It now hangs discreetly above your doorway where only you and your lairs can see. Of course, formal Roman religion still exists temples, priests, grand sacrifices. But that's for senators and processions. Here in the insula, you deal in smaller comforts. A household charm, a whispered name, a borrowed flame from a neighbor to relight your altar when your lamp goes out. There's also your upstairs neighbor, old Marcia, who believes in everything. Every spirit, every omen, every warning. She talks to her house shadow as if it's a roommate. Once she even tried sacrificing a mouse to bless the staircase. The other tenants made her stop. Mostly because the mouse wasn't entirely dead yet. Still, when your olive oil went rancid and your sandals split in the same week, you accepted her gifted charm without protest. It's ugly dried beans glued to a wax disc. But who are you to challenge the wisdom of someone with 7 cats and 2 working knees? Sometimes you wonder, do the gods even notice you? Does Jupiter hear the muttered thanks when your fire doesn't go out? Does Mercury smile when your coin purse is left untouched in a crowded market? Maybe not. But maybe the lairs do. The household spirits. The ones who watch you stumble home, light your lamp, hang your tunic, and collapse into sleep. The ones who you hope nudge away the rat from your toe in the middle of the night. Quirky belief. Maybe, but in a place where your life could change with a broken stair or a spilled bucket, you need all the spiritual backup you can get. Tonight, someone down the hall sings a low, strange tune. You don't know the words, it's not Latin, but the melody makes your hair stand on end. You lean against your door frame and listen. The Lares are listening too, probably. Or at least they'd better be. A gust of warm wind floats through the corridor. Someone's curtain dances. A single candle flickers, then steadies. You retreat to your sleeping mat, the smell of burnt rosemary lingering faintly. It's oddly comforting, and you wonder just briefly if tomorrow's going to be better. If the gods, big or small, might be feeling generous. You close your eyes, and in the quiet you hear one last whisper. Not from above, not from the stairs. From inside the wall. You smile, because here even the plaster listens. It starts with a lamp. It always does. Not a big one, just a small clay thing left burning a little too long, a little too close to a curtain stiff with soot and the grease of many dinners. No one sees it tip. No one hears the hiss as oil hits fabric. But in an insula like yours, fire moves faster than thought. You're dreaming of something pleasant. Flat roads, full jugs, maybe a good seat at the baths. Then the shouting starts. Someone screams, "Ignis!" and you're up before you know what you're doing. The hallway is already hazy shadows flickering like dancers. Downstairs, feet thunder on stone. A baby cries. Someone is coughing, deep, rattling, desperate. This is the nightmare that's always in the back of your mind, isn't it, fire? You live stacked high above a city that burns all the time. Rome's insulae are notorious for it. These buildings are cheap, hasty, and made mostly of timber. Even the stone parts are often just facades. Once a blaze starts, there's no stopping it just running. You grab your satchel, a coin or two, your sandal, just one. You don't even remember putting it on. You shove the door open. Smoke pours in like a creature. It's not yet choking, but it will be. Fast. You think back to earlier, the flickering lamp on your neighbor's floor. Was it him? Was it you? Does it matter? The stairwell's already packed. Bodies everywhere. No one speaking in full sentences, just gasps, cries, curses. Someone shouts for their child, someone else is trying to carry a chicken. You don't see Flavia, but you hear her voice shrill and commanding, cutting through the panic like a knife. Historically, fires in Rome were constant. The city even had its own fire brigade vigils, a kind of bucket-passing, axe-wielding crew who did their best with water vinegar and divine pleading. But they were slow to arrive. especially in the crowded districts like yours. You finally reach the ground floor. Sort of. The final few steps have vanished into flame. Someone throws a blanket over the side trying to slide down. It rips halfway. They fall. You flinch. You hesitate. But not long. You climb down after them. Not gracefully. You scrape your shin. You land on your knees. But you land. Outside, the night is chaos. Half the block is awake. The sky above your building glows orange, flickering behind black smoke. Sparks float like cursed fireflies, and your insula. It's screaming. The timbers groan as if in pain. Shutters fall like dead leaves. A piece of the roof crumbles inward with a loud final crack. And still people pour out. Your neighbors are here stunned. Soot-faced, panting. One has nothing but a loaf of bread. Another cradles a chipped statue of a household god. A child has a rooster under their tunic. You don't ask. Then the street clears for the vigils. You'd hoped they were just a legend. But no, here they are. Tunics, wet tools, raised barking orders. They move in like ants flinging buckets, hacking fire breaks, trying to stop the inevitable. But here's the dark truth. In many cases, they don't try to save the building. They try to save the buildings next to it. Fire spreads fast in Rome, but fear spreads faster. A spark on your roof could leap 3 streets by morning. And so the insula is sacrificed. Historians still debate how organized these efforts were. Some say the vigils acted with military precision. Others claim they often waited to be bribed by landlords or desperate tenants before lifting a finger. You watching your home burn from a safe distance don't have the luxury of historical analysis. You just watch the flames. And they are beautiful. Terrible, yes. But beautiful in that awful hypnotic way. Like watching a monster breathe. You think about everything in there. The tunic you meant to patch. The pot you borrowed and forgot to return. The Lairs shrine. The bean amulet. All gone. Or maybe not. Because even here, as heat distorts the air and ash rains like strange hot snow, people start talking. Checking in. Calling names. Counting heads. Flavia appears beside you, black smudges across her cheeks, holding someone's cat. She sees your sandal and raises an eyebrow. You laugh. You have to. It sounds like choking, but you laugh anyway. Somehow someone brings wine. Not much. Just a small jug passed around in silence. It tastes of smoke. You don't care. Rome will rebuild. It always does. The city is a phoenix on repeat. Entire neighborhoods vanish overnight and rise again crooked and slightly smellier. Some landlords will claim insurance, yes, that existed, sort of, and others will simply start over with cheaper bricks. You wonder if you'll move. If you'll try for a lower floor next time. Or maybe a smaller building. Or maybe absurdly the same spot. You knew the creaks, the smells, the rhythms. There's a comfort in ruin that was once familiar. Someone starts singing. Not loudly, just a lullaby. Soft and cracked. Others join in. No one tells them to stop. Tomorrow you'll sift through rubble. Maybe find a cup of button half a memory. You'll file a claim with someone who doesn't care. You'll argue about who left the lamp burning. But not tonight. Tonight you sit with the others on the edge of something blackened and gone. Watching the fire fade. Watching the dawn approach. And behind you as the sun rises, the insula groans once more. And collapses into itself with a sound like thunder and grief. You close your eyes. You don't look back. You haven't slept. No one really has. You dozed then maybe leaned against a half-broken fountain wrapped in a borrowed blanket, listening to pigeons return to their usual perches like nothing happened. But full sleep. Not after that night. The ruins of your insula still smolder gently in the morning haze. The walls are mostly gone. A few beams lean like drunken pillars, and the top floors are now the bottom ones crushed and scattered across the courtyard like broken bread. Smoke still curls up from under the blackened stone, reaching lazily toward a sky that doesn't care. And yet, you're not the only one here. People come back, one by one. Shuffling quietly. A boy and his grandmother looking for a metal cooking pan. A man sorting through charred beams for coins hidden in the walls. Flavia shows up with a broom of all things, as if she might somehow tidy the place back into existence. You try not to laugh, but it's hard not to admire it. That's the strange thing about Rome, especially in these ramshackle, soot-stained apartments. They're awful. They really are. Cold in winter, boiling in summer, loud all the time, and designed like someone rolled dice to determine where your front door went. But they're also alive. Always buzzing, always moving. A hive of bad plumbing, good bread, loud neighbors, and quiet rituals. Historians still argue whether the people who lived in these crumbling insulae thought of them as home or merely temporary shelter. But when you see the woman from the third floor scooping ash away from her doorstep, as if preparing to go inside, you think, yeah, it was home. You pick your way through the rubble too. You're not even sure what you're looking for, maybe nothing. Maybe just closure. But somehow you find your mat half singed and covered in dirt. And a single sandal. The missing one from last night. You smile. People nearby are already talking about where they'll go next. A friend's cousin has space. Someone's heard a building on the Aventine has vacancies. Someone else says a new insula will be going up in the same spot. They're already clearing the street. Rome moves fast, always has. There's a kind of dignity in this kind of ruin. You're not some grand senator whose marble villa will be restored by teams of sculptors. You're not a soldier marching home with plunder. You're just a resident, an apartment dweller, an insula inhabitant. But you lived. You cooked and prayed and spilled soup and banged your knee on the stair rail and made peace with your upstairs neighbor's accordion-playing toddler. You remember the rats, the laundry lines, the roof leaks, the time your ceiling dripped someone else's wine for a week. You remember warmth too, the way neighbors shared oil lamps during shortages, the way the old lady 2 doors down sang lullabies in Greek, the smell of bread wafting through vents that shouldn't exist, the thrill of running up 5 flights with a fresh fig in your hand. You remember living, and in a city like Rome that's worth a lot. By midday, some vendors are already back. A man with a cart is selling boiled lentils in cracked bowls. Another offers second-hand tunics, slightly smoked. People gather around talking, laughing in hoarse, exhausted voices. You join them, you eat. The lentils are dry, but you don't care. Someone mentions another fire on the other side of the city. Someone else says Nero is building a massive new palace where their uncle's bakery used to be. Everyone groans. Life in the insula was bad, but at least it was yours. No one promises this won't happen again. In fact, it probably will, but you'll rebuild, or move, or both, because that's how Rome works. Collapse, build, repeat. The empire survives not through glory, but through stubbornness. The apartment's gone, but you're still here. And tomorrow, with one sandal on, you'll climb a new staircase. Knock on a new door. Leave a new offering to a new household spirit. The walls will be cracked. The neighbors will be loud. The toilet will still be a shared bucket 2 floors down. But somehow that's all right, because this is Rome, and this is your life. And now with ash on your feet and the scent of burnt pine lingering in your hair, you finally lie down on a borrowed mat beneath a borrowed roof, but safe. The streets beyond still hum, but softly now. The merchants have lowered their voices, the dogs are settling, and even the pigeons are roosting in shadows. There's a calm to the city that only comes when everyone is equally exhausted. Above you, a curtain sways gently in the night breeze. You hear the creak of a wooden beam, the rustle of cloth, and someone humming faintly down the hall. Familiar noises. Not home yet, but close. Your eyes drift closed, and the heat of the fire is replaced by the warmth of memory-scattered voices. The flicker of oil lamps, the taste of bad wine. The sharp laugh of a friend leaning on a windowsill 3 floors up. The worst nights still end. The most brutal lives still pause for sleep. So breathe in deeply and let it go. The gods big and small have gone quiet for now. The city ever restless allows you this moment. No fires, no shouting. Just the gentle rhythm of distant footsteps and the faint lullaby of a world still standing. You're safe. You're not alone. And your story continues tomorrow. Good night, Insula Dweller. Sleep well.